Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the English Podcast. My name is Adam, and I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host, Julia. Together, we are here to guide you on your journey to mastering the English language, one step at a time.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Whether you're tuning in from your home, on your way to work, or during a quiet moment in your day, we're so excited to be part of your English learning experience.
That's right, Julia. We understand how challenging it can be to learn a new language, especially when you encounter setbacks along the way. But what if I told you that those setbacks, those little mistakes you make, are actually some of the most valuable tools for learning?
Exactly. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is incredibly important for every language learner, regardless of their level. Our focus is on how to turn mistakes into milestones on your path to fluency. This is a concept that can truly transform the way you approach learning English.
So often, people see mistakes as something negative, something to avoid or feel embarrassed about. But the truth is that mistakes are not only normal, but absolutely essential for growth. They show us where we need to improve, give us opportunities to practice, and, most importantly, remind us that we're actively trying and making progress.
Let's take a moment to talk about why this topic matters so much, especially for English learners. Many people hesitate to speak because they're afraid of making mistakes, but this fear often holds them back from real progress. Mistakes are a natural part of learning any skill, and language learning is no exception.
That's so true, Julia. If we think about it, when we were children learning our first language, we didn't get it right the first time. We made countless errors, but we learned from them and kept going. The same principle applies to learning English as a second language. Every mistake you make is a stepping stone that brings you closer to fluency.
Exactly, Adam. When you make a mistake, it's not a sign of failure. It's evidence that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and actively engaging with the language. In fact, making mistakes often helps us remember things more effectively because we're learning through experience, not just theory.
And let's not forget how important it is to change our mindset about mistakes. If we see them as opportunities rather than obstacles, they can actually become a source of motivation. When you recognize that every error you make is teaching you something new, you'll start to view mistakes as an essential part of the learning process rather than something to be feared.
That's such an important point, Adam. Think of mistakes as milestones. They mark the moments when you are pushing yourself to try something new, even if it's not perfect yet. Each mistake you make brings you one step closer to mastering the language, and that's something to celebrate.
So, by the end of today's episode, our goal is to help you see mistakes not as barriers, but as building blocks. We want to empower you to embrace them, learn from them, and ultimately turn them into milestones on your journey to fluency.
Absolutely. We'll be sharing stories, strategies, and tips to help you use your mistakes as powerful tools for improvement. So, get comfortable, stay with us, and let's dive into this exciting conversation about how to make mistakes work for you.
This is going to be a transformative episode, and we can't wait to share everything we've prepared. Let's get started. Now that we've set the stage with the importance of viewing mistakes as milestones, let's dive a bit deeper into the types of mistakes learners often encounter when learning English. It's important to recognize these because understanding the problem is the first step towards solving it. Julia, let's talk about the most common types of mistakes learners make in English.
Absolutely, Adam. One of the most common areas where learners struggle is grammar. This isn't surprising because English grammar has a lot of rules, and some of them can feel quite complicated or even contradictory. For instance, many beginners have trouble with verb tenses. Deciding between past simple and present perfect, for example, can be confusing. You might hear someone say, "I have went to the market yesterday," instead of, "I went to the market yesterday." These kinds of errors happen because learners are still getting comfortable with the rules.
That's so true, Julia. Articles are another tricky area. In English, we have a, an, and the, and knowing when to use them can be difficult. For example, someone might say, "I saw dog in park," instead of, I saw a dog in the park. While the mistake doesn't stop communication, it can make the sentence sound incomplete or unnatural. But these errors are completely normal and a sign that the learner is actively trying to use the language.
Absolutely. Another area where mistakes are common is pronunciation. English has sounds that might not exist in other languages, which can make it challenging for learners to pronounce certain words correctly. For example, the TH sound in words like think or this is often replaced with T or D, resulting in tink or dis. Pronunciation errors are particularly common because they involve physical habits, like the way your tongue moves or how you shape your mouth. These habits take time to adjust and practice is essential.
And let's not forget about vocabulary. This is another common challenge for learners. Sometimes people use a word that doesn't quite fit the context. For example, saying, I am very boring, instead of, I am very bored. It's a small difference, but it can completely change the meaning of the sentence. This happens because learners are still building their vocabulary and may not yet fully understand the nuances of certain words.
Yes, Adam. It's also common for learners to translate directly from their native language, which can lead to sentences that sound unnatural in English. For example, someone might say, she has 30 years, instead of, she is 30 years old, because in some languages, age is expressed with the verb have. These kinds of mistakes are very normal, especially when someone is just starting out.
That's a great point, Julia. And this leads us to an important question. Why do we make these mistakes in the first place? What is it about language learning that makes mistakes such a natural part of the process?
Let's start with one major reason: nervousness or lack of practice. Many learners feel anxious when they speak English, especially in front of native speakers. This nervousness can make them forget rules they already know or cause them to hesitate, which leads to mistakes. It's similar to stage fright. You know your lines, but in the moment, you might forget them.
Exactly, Julia. Nervousness can also make learners second-guess themselves, which can lead to even more errors. For instance, someone might overthink their sentence and end up changing it mid-sentence, creating confusion. This is why practice is so important. The more you practice speaking, the more confident you become, and the fewer mistakes you'll make over time.
Another reason learners make mistakes is that they often translate directly from their native language into English. This is very common, especially in the early stages of learning. For example, in some languages, you might say, I have hunger, instead of, I am hungry. When learners rely on direct translation, the sentence structure or vocabulary might not match English conventions, which can lead to errors.
That's a great observation, Julia. Another example of this is word order. In English, the adjective usually comes before the noun, like in a red car. But in other languages, it's the opposite, so learners might say, a car red. These kinds of mistakes happen because the brain is trying to process the new language while still relying on the rules of the native language. It's a natural part of the transition, and with time and exposure, learners begin to internalize the correct structures.
That's so true, Adam. Another contributing factor is the sheer volume of rules and exceptions in English. English has a lot of irregular verbs, idiomatic expressions, and exceptions to grammar rules, which can be overwhelming for learners. For example, why do we say feet instead of foots? Or why is the plural of mouse not mouses? These irregularities can trip up even advanced learners, and they often lead to mistakes along the way.
And let's not forget that language learning is a highly complex skill. It's not just about memorizing words and rules. It's about listening, speaking, reading, and writing, all at the same time. Mistakes are a natural result of this complexity. They're a sign that your brain is working hard to process and apply what you're learning.
Exactly, Adam. Mistakes show that you're engaging with the language, experimenting, and actively trying to improve. They're not a sign of failure, they're a sign of progress. And once learners understand why they're making mistakes, they can start to address those challenges and turn them into learning opportunities.
That's right, Julia. By the end of this episode, we hope our listeners will feel encouraged to embrace their mistakes, learn from them, and use them as stepping stones toward fluency. Remember, every mistake is an opportunity to grow, and the more you practice, the more confident and capable you'll become.
So, let's keep exploring this fascinating topic. In the next segment, we'll share personal stories and practical strategies to help you turn your mistakes into milestones.
In this segment, we want to make the idea of learning from mistakes feel more relatable and real. To do that, Julia and I are going to share some personal stories about how mistakes have shaped our journeys, both in learning and teaching. These are experiences that have stayed with us because they taught us valuable lessons and changed the way we view growth and progress.
That's right, Adam. Mistakes aren't just abstract concepts or something we talk about to sound encouraging. They're a very real part of every person's journey, including ours. Whether we're learning a new skill, navigating a new language, or helping others on their path, mistakes are always part of the process. Adam, why don't you start by sharing your story? I know you've had some memorable learning experiences.
Absolutely, Julia. I'd be happy to. My story is about the time I decided to learn French. Now, as someone who speaks English fluently, I thought, how hard can it be? I was confident that I could pick it up quickly because English has so many words borrowed from French. But, as it turned out, my confidence quickly ran into a wall. I remember this one incident vividly. I was visiting Paris, and I wanted to impress the locals by speaking their language. So I walked into a cafe, looked at the menu, and confidently said to the waiter, "Je veux un café et un pain, s'il vous plaît," which I thought meant, "I want a coffee and a piece of bread, please." The waiter gave me a puzzled look, smiled politely, and walked away. A few minutes later, he brought me coffee and a plate of plain bread. I had meant to order a croissant, but instead, I'd literally asked for bread. It was such a small mistake, but it felt huge in the moment. I was embarrassed and frustrated with myself. I remember thinking, how could I get that wrong? But after reflecting on it, I realized something important. I had communicated. Even if I didn't use the exact words I wanted, the waiter understood me, and I got something to eat. That moment taught me two things. First, that mistakes are a normal part of learning, and second, that the fear of making mistakes shouldn't stop me from trying.
That's such a great story, Adam. It's a perfect example of how mistakes can teach us something valuable, even when they feel awkward or uncomfortable at the time. And the fact that you were able to laugh about it later shows how important it is to keep a positive attitude.
Exactly, Julia. After that experience, I stopped worrying so much about being perfect. I started speaking more, even if I wasn't sure my sentences were 100% correct. And you know what? That's when I started improving the most. Every mistake I made taught me something new, whether it was about vocabulary, grammar, or pronunciation. Looking back, I wouldn't trade those mistakes for anything because they were the stepping stones that helped me become more confident in French.
Thanks for sharing that, Adam. It's always inspiring to hear how mistakes can lead to growth. My story comes from the other side of the learning process, teaching English. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working with so many amazing students, and one of the things that always stands out to me is how much they grow when they embrace their mistakes instead of fearing them. There was one student I worked with a few years ago who really stands out in my memory. Her name was Maria, and she was incredibly bright and motivated, but she was also very nervous about speaking English. Every time she made a mistake, she would apologize and say, "I'm sorry, my English is bad." It broke my heart because her English wasn't bad at all. She was just learning. One day we were practicing conversational English, and she was trying to describe her weekend. She said, "Yesterday I go to the park, and I see many ducks." She immediately stopped and looked at me panicked and said, "Is it wrong?" I smiled and told her, yes, there are some small errors, but I understood exactly what you meant. That's what matters most. I explained the correct sentence. Yesterday I went to the park and I saw many ducks. She repeated it after me and smiled for the first time that day. From that moment on, something changed in Maria. She stopped apologizing for her mistakes and started seeing them as opportunities to learn. Over the next few months, her confidence grew tremendously. By the end of the course, she was speaking fluently and even helping other students who were just starting out. Watching her transform was one of the most rewarding experiences of my teaching career.
That's such a beautiful story, Julia. It really shows how powerful encouragement can be when someone is feeling unsure about their abilities. And it's a great reminder that mistakes are not just learning opportunities for the person making them. They can inspire and motivate others, too.
Exactly, Adam. And that's why we want to take a moment to speak directly to our listeners. If you're feeling nervous about making mistakes, please know that you are not alone. Every single person who has ever learned a new language, whether they're a beginner or an expert, has made countless mistakes along the way.
That's right, Julia. Even native speakers make mistakes. How many times have you heard someone say, "I seen it," instead of "I saw it," or mix up words like there and there? Mistakes are part of being human, and they don't define your ability or intelligence.
Absolutely. The key is to keep going. Don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back from speaking, writing, or trying something new. Each time you step out of your comfort zone, you're taking a step closer to fluency.
And remember, mistakes are milestones. They mark the moments when you're pushing yourself, learning, and growing. So, the next time you make a mistake, celebrate it. It's proof that you're making progress.
We hope these stories inspire you to embrace your own mistakes and use them as tools for learning. In the next segment, we'll share practical tips for turning your mistakes into milestones.
Now that we've shared some personal stories about learning from mistakes, let's focus on the practical side of things. This segment is all about strategies, specific actions you can take to turn your mistakes into stepping stones for fluency. Mistakes are only helpful if we know how to use them. So, Julia and I are going to share some tips that have worked for us and our students over the years.
That's right, Adam. Turning mistakes into milestones isn't something that happens by chance. It's a deliberate process that requires patience, consistency, and a positive mindset. Think of your mistakes as the signposts on your journey to fluency. Each one points you in the direction of improvement, but you have to be willing to follow the path. So, let's dive into the strategies, starting with Adam's tips.
Thanks, Julia. My first tip is simple but incredibly powerful. Practice daily and embrace errors. Consistency is key when learning any new skill, especially a language. It's not enough to study once in a while or only when you feel confident. The more you practice, the more opportunities you have to make mistakes. And each mistake is a chance to learn. Let me give you an example. When I was learning Spanish, I set a goal to speak for at least 10 minutes a day, no matter how I felt. At first, I was nervous because I knew I'd make a lot of errors, but I told myself that mistakes were part of the process. One day I was practicing with a friend, and I accidentally said, "Estoy caliente," which literally means, "I am hot," in an embarrassing way, instead of saying, "Tengo calor," which means, "I feel hot." My friend laughed, and I felt a bit embarrassed, but I never forgot that lesson. Because I practiced daily, I made that mistake early on, and it helped me avoid saying it again in more formal situations. Another strategy I highly recommend is recording yourself speaking. This might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's an amazing way to identify areas for improvement. When you listen to yourself, you'll notice things you might not catch in the moment, like mispronounced words or awkward sentence structures. You don't have to share these recordings with anyone. This is just for you. Over time, you'll see how much progress you've made, which is incredibly motivating.
Those are fantastic tips, Adam. I especially love the idea of recording yourself. It's such a simple but effective way to track your growth. And you're absolutely right. Daily practice is non-negotiable if you want to turn your mistakes into milestones. Now it's my turn to share a few strategies. One of the most important things I've learned as a teacher is the value of corrections. Whenever someone corrects you, whether it's a teacher, a friend, or even an app, don't take it as criticism. Instead, see it as a gift. Every correction is an opportunity to get closer to fluency. One of the best ways to internalize corrections is to write down your mistakes. Keep a notebook or digital document where you record the errors you make, along with the correct versions. For example, if you said, "She go to the store," write it down and add the correct sentence. "She goes to the store." Review these notes regularly, especially before speaking or writing in English. Over time, you'll notice patterns in your mistakes, and this awareness will help you avoid repeating them. Another tip I want to emphasize is the importance of focusing on progress, not perfection. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. It's easy to get discouraged if you compare yourself to native speakers or advanced learners, but remember that every small step counts. Celebrate your achievements, no matter how minor they seem. Did you hold a conversation without switching to your native language? That's a win. Did you learn a new word and use it correctly? That's progress. By focusing on what you've accomplished, rather than what you still need to learn, you'll stay motivated and confident.
I love that, Julia. Keeping track of mistakes and celebrating small victories are such effective ways to stay positive and keep moving forward. It's so easy to overlook how far you've come when you're focused on what's ahead.
Now let's make this a bit more interactive. For our listeners, we're going to practice correcting some common mistakes together. This is a great way to reinforce the idea that mistakes are normal and fixable. So wherever you are, whether you're at home, on a walk, or commuting, join us in this exercise.
All right, let's start with a simple sentence. I go to the market yesterday. Now, think about what's wrong with this sentence. Take a moment to say it out loud or write it down.
Got it? The correct sentence is, I went to the market yesterday. The mistake here is the verb tense. Because we're talking about the past, we need to use went instead of go.
Here's another one. She don't like coffee. What's wrong with this sentence? Think about it and try to correct it.
The correct sentence is, she doesn't like coffee. The mistake here is with the auxiliary verb. When using doesn't, we don't add an S to the main verb.
Great job, everyone. Remember, the goal isn't to be perfect right away. It's to recognize your mistakes, understand why they happen, and learn from them.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this exercise, try creating your own sentences and correcting them. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel.
We hope these strategies and tips give you the tools you need to turn your mistakes into milestones. In the next segment, we'll answer some listener questions about overcoming fear and staying motivated. Welcome back to the English Globe. In this segment, Julia and I want to focus on making the learning process fun and engaging. We've talked about why mistakes are important and how to learn from them, but now it's time to put theory into practice. Let's explore some activities you can use to embrace your mistakes while improving your English fluency. Remember, the goal is not just to learn, but to enjoy the process, even when it gets challenging.
Exactly, Adam. Learning a language doesn't have to be all about textbooks and formal lessons. There are so many creative and interactive ways to practice English while learning from your mistakes. The key is to make these activities part of your routine so that they become second nature. Let's start with some fun practice ideas that you can try on your own or with a friend.
One of my favorite activities for practicing English is role-playing simple conversations. It's such a versatile method because you can adapt it to almost any situation. For example, imagine you're at a coffee shop ordering a drink. You can play both roles, the customer and the barista, or you can practice with a friend. Start with a basic dialogue like, Customer: Hello, I want 1 coffee, please. Barista: Would you like milk or sugar in your coffee? Customer: Yes, I want both. Now, listen carefully to your responses. Are you using the right phrases? Is your grammar correct? Maybe instead of saying I want, you could try I would like, which is a bit more polite. It's okay to make mistakes while role-playing because that's the whole point. Once you notice an error, repeat the sentence the right way and move on. Over time, these corrections will stick, and you'll feel more confident using the language in real life.
That's a great tip, Adam. Another fun and interactive activity is playing a game I like to call Spot the Mistake. Here's how it works. Write down a few sentences, intentionally adding small errors. For example, she go to school every day. I am not understand this question. They doesn't like pizza. Now your job is to find the mistakes in each sentence and correct them. This game is not only fun but also incredibly effective because it trains your brain to identify common errors. You can make it even more challenging by setting a timer or asking a friend to write the sentences for you.
And if you're working with a group or in a classroom, Spot the Mistake can become a collaborative activity. Divide into teams and see who can correct the most sentences in a set amount of time. It's a great way to add a little friendly competition to your learning process.
Now let's talk about something equally important: tracking your progress. Learning a language is a journey, and keeping track of your improvements can help you stay motivated and focused. One of the simplest yet most effective ways to do this is by keeping a journal of common mistakes. Here's how it works. Every time you notice an error, whether it's something you said, wrote, or were corrected on, write it down in your journal. For example, if you keep saying, I have 20 years old, instead of I am 20 years old, jot it down. Next to the mistake, write the correct version, and maybe even add a short explanation to remind yourself why it's correct. Over time, this journal will become a valuable resource. You'll see patterns in your mistakes, and as you review them, you'll naturally start to make fewer errors.
And don't forget to celebrate your small wins. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. If you notice that you're making fewer errors in your journal over time, that's a reason to celebrate. Maybe you reward yourself with a small treat, or share your progress with a friend or teacher. Recognizing these milestones keeps you motivated and reminds you that every effort counts, no matter how small it seems.
I couldn't agree more. Another way to track your progress is by recording yourself speaking, just as we mentioned earlier. Once a week, pick a topic and record a short monologue or conversation. After a month, listen to your earlier recordings and compare them to your latest ones. You'll be amazed at how much you've improved, even if the changes feel subtle day to day.
Before we wrap up this section, let's encourage our listeners to try one of these activities right now. If you're listening at home, grab a notebook and write 3 sentences with intentional mistakes. Take a moment to correct them and say the corrected sentences out loud. If you're on the go, think of a sentence in your head and try to identify where you might make a mistake.
And remember, these activities are meant to be fun, so don't be too hard on yourself. Laugh at your mistakes, learn from them, and keep practicing. Mistakes are not a reflection of failure. They're proof that you're learning and growing.
Exactly. And as you embrace these activities, you'll find that your confidence and fluency improve naturally. Stay tuned for our final segment, where we'll answer some listener questions and wrap up today's discussion on turning mistakes into milestones. In this section, we want to dive into the importance of patience in the journey of learning English. We've talked a lot about mistakes and how to turn them into milestones, but now let's focus on the process of learning itself. It's easy to get frustrated when progress seems slow, but trust me, patience is one of the most powerful tools you can have when learning a new language.
That's absolutely true, Adam. It's important to remember that learning a language is not a race. It's a journey that takes time, and you're going to face many moments where it feels like you're not making progress. But if you trust the process and stay patient, those small efforts will add up to significant improvements over time.
When I started learning French, there were times when I felt frustrated because I couldn't remember certain vocabulary words, or I kept making mistakes in grammar. It felt like I was never going to reach the fluency I wanted. But here's what I learned. Language learning isn't just about getting everything perfect. It's about developing skills over time, and sometimes the most important growth happens when you least expect it. Think of it this way. Learning English, or any language, is like building a house. You can't rush the foundation. You need to lay it brick by brick. In the beginning, the progress might seem slow. Maybe you're learning simple words, phrases, or basic grammar rules. But over time, as you continue practicing and correcting your mistakes, those little lessons begin to build up. Eventually, you'll have a strong foundation that allows you to speak and understand the language with ease.
Exactly, Adam. Patience allows you to stay focused and motivated, even when things get tough. I've seen so many students who were initially discouraged because they weren't improving as quickly as they wanted. But once they started to embrace the learning process and stop worrying about how fast they were going, they saw huge improvements. The key is consistency.
One of the most important things you can do is set realistic expectations for yourself. Instead of thinking you need to speak fluently in 6 months, set smaller, more achievable goals. Maybe your goal for the next month is to learn 50 new words or practice speaking for 10 minutes every day. These smaller milestones will keep you motivated, and as you achieve them, you'll feel that sense of progress.
That's a great point, Adam. Another way to stay patient is to reflect on how far you've come. Every time you feel frustrated, take a moment to think back to when you started learning English. Compare how much you know now with what you knew at the beginning. You'll be amazed at your progress, even if it feels small. Also, don't forget to celebrate the little wins. Maybe you made fewer mistakes when ordering food at a restaurant or had a conversation in English without needing to look up a word. These moments are proof that you're moving forward, and you should celebrate them.
Celebrating those small wins is so important. It's easy to focus on what we don't know or the mistakes we make, but when we take the time to appreciate how far we've come, it gives us the energy to keep going. It's all about finding joy in the journey rather than rushing to the finish line.
Sometimes it's also helpful to find a language partner or a teacher who can encourage you along the way. When you have someone to support you, whether it's through feedback or simply cheering you on, it makes the journey feel less lonely. Plus, they can remind you of your progress when you start to doubt yourself.
That's why having a language partner is so valuable. Not only does it help you practice your speaking, but it also gives you an opportunity to share your struggles and successes with someone else. Together, you can celebrate your achievements, help each other with corrections, and keep each other motivated.
And don't forget to take breaks when needed. Learning a language is a long process, and it's okay to step away for a while. Resting allows your brain to process and store new information. And when you return to studying, you'll feel refreshed and more ready to tackle new challenges.
Before we end today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on how patience really plays a crucial role in mastering English. Yes, making mistakes is part of the process, but learning to trust yourself and the learning process is just as important.
Exactly. When you give yourself permission to take things slow and embrace each mistake as a learning opportunity, you'll start to enjoy the journey. Over time, you'll see that all those small steps lead to significant progress, and the effort you put in today will pay off in the long run.
So, to our listeners out there, be patient with yourself, stay consistent, and keep pushing forward. You're doing great. And remember, every mistake is just another milestone on your path to fluency.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you all for joining us here at the English Globe. We hope you feel encouraged to embrace your mistakes and see them as stepping stones to greater fluency. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue exploring helpful tips and strategies to make your English learning journey even more successful.
In this segment, Julia and I will answer some of the most common questions we've received from our listeners about learning English, especially for beginners. We know that language learning can come with a lot of challenges, and you might have questions about how to move forward or make progress. Well, don't worry. Today, we've pre-collected a few questions from our listeners, and we're here to share some helpful tips and insights to support you on your English learning journey.
That's right, Adam. Learning English can sometimes feel overwhelming, and you might wonder if you're on the right track. But remember, every question is an opportunity to learn, and today we're going to tackle a few of the most common concerns from beginners. So, let's jump right in and hear our first question. Listener, question 1. How can I improve my vocabulary as a beginner?
Great question. Expanding your vocabulary is an essential part of learning any language. As a beginner, it's important to focus on learning words that are useful in everyday situations, like greetings, simple expressions, and vocabulary related to your daily life. One great tip I can share is to use flashcards or language apps that help you practice vocabulary regularly. These tools often use spaced repetition, which ensures that you review the words at regular intervals to strengthen your memory. Another great strategy is to read simple texts, like children's books or beginner-level articles, and highlight any new words you come across. Once you learn a new word, try to use it in your conversations or writing. The more you actively use a new word, the better you'll remember it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, even when using new words. It's all part of the learning process.
Exactly, Adam. I'd also recommend watching TV shows or listening to podcasts in English, especially those for beginners, like ours. This way, you can hear how words are used in context and get a feel for their meanings. When you come across a new word, pause and look it up. This helps reinforce your learning. And, as you hear these words repeatedly, your brain starts to recognize them, making them easier to recall when you need them.
Listener. Question 2. How do I improve my pronunciation when I don't have anyone to practice with?
This is a great question. Pronunciation can be tricky, especially when you're learning a language on your own. One thing I suggest is to listen to native speakers as much as possible. This could be through podcasts, YouTube videos, or movies. Pay close attention to how the words sound and try to mimic them as best as you can. You don't need a conversation partner for this. You can practice on your own, repeating words or sentences aloud. Another useful tip is to use language apps that feature pronunciation exercises. Some apps allow you to record yourself saying a word or phrase, and they will give you feedback on how accurately you've pronounced it. This is a great way to fine-tune your pronunciation without needing a teacher or language partner.
That's a great suggestion, Julia. Also, don't underestimate the power of speaking in front of a mirror. By practicing in front of the mirror, you can observe the shape of your mouth and how it moves while pronouncing different sounds. It might feel a little strange at first, but it's a fantastic way to become more aware of your pronunciation. Plus, it helps build confidence because you can hear yourself improving each time you practice.
Listener. Question 3. I make a lot of mistakes. How can I stop being afraid of making them?
I love this question because it's something all of us can relate to. As we've mentioned earlier in this episode, mistakes are not something to fear. They are opportunities for growth. The more mistakes you make, the more you'll learn. This is how you improve. If you feel nervous about making mistakes, remind yourself that even native English speakers make errors every day. Mistakes are part of every learning process, not just language learning. What's important is that you don't let those mistakes discourage you. Instead, view them as stepping stones on your journey to fluency.
Absolutely. One technique that has helped many of my students is to reframe how they see mistakes. Rather than thinking, I've made a mistake, I'm not good enough, try thinking, I've made a mistake, and now I know how to do better next time. When you change the way you view mistakes, they become much less intimidating. And remember, when you're speaking or writing, it's more important to communicate your ideas clearly than to worry about making every sentence perfect.
Listener. Question 4. How can I practice speaking English if I don't know anyone who speaks the language?
This is a very common question, especially for beginners who may not have access to native English speakers. One great solution is to find an online language partner or join language exchange platforms. There are many websites and apps where you can connect with people around the world who are also learning English or who are fluent in the language and want to help others practice. You don't need to meet face-to-face. Many of these platforms offer video calls, or messaging features.
Great advice, Julia. Additionally, practicing speaking with yourself can also be a useful way to improve. Start by describing your day in English or narrating what you're doing as you go about your routine. For example, when you're cooking, try saying the steps out loud in English. Or when you're out walking, try to describe the surroundings around you in English. This helps you get comfortable using the language in real-life situations, even if you're alone.
Those are fantastic tips, Adam. And thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. Remember, no matter where you are on your learning journey, you're not alone. We all make mistakes, but that's how we grow. Keep practicing, stay patient, and never stop learning. That's right, Julia. Keep pushing forward and always embrace every opportunity to improve. Thank you all for tuning in to the English Globe today. We hope these answers have been helpful and that you feel more confident moving forward. Remember, mistakes are part of the process, and with patience and perseverance, you'll get closer to fluency every day.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Keep practicing and don't be afraid to make those mistakes. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed. The most important message we want to leave with you is simple. Mistakes are not failures. They are powerful tools for growth. Every time you make a mistake, whether it's a grammar error, a mispronounced word, or even a misunderstanding in conversation, you're getting one step closer to fluency. It's easy to feel discouraged when we stumble, but each mistake is an opportunity to improve, to learn something new, and to build your skills. Remember, no one becomes fluent in a language overnight. It's a journey, and part of that journey involves making mistakes. So instead of seeing them as setbacks, let's view them as milestones. Every mistake you make is a small victory on the road to mastering English.
Exactly, Adam. It's natural to feel frustrated or nervous when you make mistakes, especially in a new language. But, as we've said throughout today's episode, the key is to embrace those mistakes and learn from them. Don't let them hold you back. Instead, use them as stepping stones, as markers of progress that show you are actively learning and growing. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. So, be patient with yourself. Celebrate the little victories, like when you use a new word correctly or when you notice your pronunciation improving. It's also important to remember that learning a language is not just about being perfect. It's about communication. Even if you make a mistake, if you can get your message across, you've succeeded. And that's something to be proud of.
That's right, Julia. Language learning is a journey of constant improvement, and with every step you take, no matter how small it may seem, you are becoming more fluent, more confident, and more skilled. Don't forget that every time you practice, even when it's tough, you are making progress. So, keep going, keep learning, and keep embracing those mistakes. They are a vital part of your growth as an English speaker.
And don't be afraid to keep practicing, even if you don't have a language partner or a teacher by your side all the time. There are so many ways to practice, from listening to podcasts like this one, to watching movies or reading books in English, to speaking to yourself in the mirror or journaling in English. There are endless opportunities for practice, and every moment of practice is valuable.
Absolutely, Julia. As we wrap up, we want to leave you with one last thought. Mistakes don't define you. They don't reflect your potential, and they don't determine your success. You define your success, and every effort you make is bringing you closer to your goal. We're all learners, and we're all on this journey together.
That's such an important point, Adam. You are capable of achieving fluency, and it's okay to stumble along the way. What matters is that you keep going, keep learning, and keep turning those mistakes into milestones. You've got this.
Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode of the English Globe. We truly hope you found today's discussion helpful and encouraging. Remember, learning English is a process, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. Embrace your mistakes, celebrate your progress, and most importantly, enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. And we can't wait to be back with you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to the English Globe so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us. We love hearing from you.
Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep practicing, stay positive, and remember, every mistake is a chance to grow. See you in the next episode.